All right. So, week 10 in this class, and as normal, I've graded your week 9 Learn Together work. And here's my general suggestion. I've noticed that there's a pattern between the students who are posting earlier in the week. And I get it, it's hard. I get it that it's hard to get on top of work at times. I've just noticed that those students have more of an opportunity, which makes sense, to correct code. Because that's what I do is I go in, I don't correct the code, but I go in and I look to see, does the form function? Does it save to local storage, right? And does it do validation? Those were the big tests that I did. And so, and I get that there's a lot of code that has to be in place for this to happen. So I just want you to know I'm encouraging you. Those of you that are struggling, I'm encouraging you to where you can. And some of you are taking my CIT82, and that class ended this week. So maybe now you'll have a little more time. So I'm just encouraging you, as much as possible, work ahead so that you can get some help, because the Learn Together, as you probably already feel, takes what we've learned and takes it to a new level, to hopefully refine and solidify that skill, that knowledge that you were exposed to. Okay, so that's my suggestion. Just know, so like for the coming week, and I'll show you when I go over my code, I'll highlight, here's the things you need to do. Now, the video for the Learn Together is still in place. It is from last semester, but it's still relevant. The thing I want to talk about today is that we are in week 10, which means we're 2 weeks away from our next dev project. And here's the good news about this is what you're going to get this week will give you everything pretty much that you need to do your dev 2, dev 1 work. Okay, so dev 0, dev 1, dev 2. That's what, and the sooner you work on it, it's the same idea of the Learn Together, right? I know I sound like a teacher, but that's what I am. All right, that's what I'm trying to be. I'm also trying to be an example of how you approach things. Because anyway, I could go off on the idea of teacher for a minute, but I'm not going to, because that's not pertinent to what we're trying to do here. But Dev 1, you have everything you need. So here's what you want to think about. If you're going to take your, and I've said this before, I'd actually suggested you already start working on your Dev 1 after the last time when you learn each of the major concepts, right? And I gave you the requirements back right after Dev 0. So if you want to go back and look, you can see those. But here's what it is. It's a CRUD app, a create, a read, an update, and a delete, okay? So however you get the user input, right, that's your create. You read it, which is saving it to local storage, rendering it back to the page, that's the read. You update it, this is what we're going to do this week. And then you also have the function to delete. Now, how you accomplish those can be varied, but it can also look very similar to what you're learning in the Udemy course. So this is where in Dev 1, you may have a little more code that looks like structure-wise, like the functions for getting the saved whatever it is, right, out of local storage, right? So those kind of functions, I wouldn't expect those to be different. But what you have to do is you have to implement your own concepts in this code. So unlike Dev 0, where I was more adamant, I didn't, if you use that code, right, it was really, really important that you knew how to explain it, by the way, which is still true, right, is you still are going to be subject to, if you didn't get this, and most of you did, even if you include some of the code from Andrews and you just update it for your own needs, like, again, like this gets saved, whatever, out of local storage, you're still responsible for explaining it. So, but I get that there's a lot of functions, and understanding this function calls this function that calls this function, we often refer to those as stackable functions, okay? So understanding, and DevTools will actually show you your stack. It'll actually show you, there's different things that can be called, but this function that calls this function that calls this function, and so on. I guess the thing I just want you to walk away with this time is that you can, right now, after this week, have everything you need to work on Dev 2. I keep saying Dev 2, Dev 1. Okay, let me move over and just also, because I put a couple of notes here, and that was my first one, right? So when we finish section 8, and this is related to here, section 8 in the Udemy course, and we're going to get into 9, and we're going to take 2 weeks to finish 9. 9 is really just saying we're going to update some of the fundamentals that you've learned with new syntax. Like for functions, instead of regular functions, we're going to learn arrow functions. We're going to learn how to what is coercion and what does that mean. So again, most of what you have is here. Okay, so in this week, and I think this would be a good time to talk about these two concepts, you're going to learn how to create an edit file, right? And in the code, Andrew is going to write, and this is a little, I just want you to know this because of the way he writes code and his directory structures and the way we've done it. When he puts /, right, that will break our code. So what you want to do, because we have the CIT like example, right? So right here, so as in here, right, I have the public open, but in your local or however you've set this up, right, you may have that CIT93, SP22. And so when you're running code down here in week 10, this directory, you're a couple folders deep. So what will happen, and again, you haven't seen this code yet, but in your function, when you render, okay, when you actually learn how to link to a new file, okay. Now this is an example of my output code. He'll have you do this because he's assuming you're following the same directory structure that he has, and you don't. Typically. Now I actually could open just this folder in VS Code and then that would work. But in general, if you have your VS Code open as I do, whenever you're setting those attributes of aref, you generally just want to leave that / off. And you'll see this both when he sets up the edit page, he calls it edit, but that can throw you a little bit, right, in there. Okay, so I just want you to know that about this, right? And the same is true depending on how you do the index file. Okay, functions from the code. Yeah, I just actually talked about this up in here, where the functions it's okay to use some of the functions. You're still responsible for describing them. Okay, so let's go over here. So this is my week 10 Learn Together. So I'll show you first how it functions, right? So there's nothing in there. If I go to local storage, there's nothing here. So if I go ahead, my validation, which I know some of you struggled with, so definitely come see me this week if you need some help with that. Driving, let's say it's Monday, and then I hit submit. Okay, so it renders to the screen. And this is where, right, I have now, this is my rate this. Now I actually ended up changing this for mine. I deleted it, but I'm going to show you how I did it this week. Was to rate this suggestion, because this is kind of a data collection idea to where I'm collecting data. I'm seeing how well, based on my logic, did the items that I suggested, the tasks, were they doable? And so what I give the user is a way to update the data, because I've created it by entering the form. I've read it by rendering to the screen. I can delete it, but I'm actually going to show you. I kind of did my update and my delete together. This is just how I did it. So once I go to rate the suggestion, then this loads a new page. And this is what you're learning this week. And we use the UUID in order to know how to go ahead and get that data. We reference it when we build the URL for that item. So each one is unique. So again, down here, not again, but I said, thanks for rating the suggestion. How well were these things? Like I gave it some basic data output, and here's the information that went into it. I could have allowed the user to actually update this, but I decided what I do is just say, hey, how well was this suggestion? And if I said it was good, right? Submit the rating, then what will happen, in my case, is that it does the work, and I'll tell you in a minute what it does, but then it goes back to here, and now there's nothing for it to show because as soon as something's rated, it no longer renders in here. So the way I did the update and somewhat the delete is I just didn't render if it had been rated as far as suggestion, but it's actually still in local storage over here, okay? So I think what I'm gonna add before I actually submit my code for the Learn Together is actually just a delete as well. So what I would do is come in here, right? And then like for Tuesday, so when I hit, I would actually also have, and I'll probably just implement that other delete that I had done last week into here so that you could just delete that as well. So then that would give me all of those functions, all of those create, read, update, and delete. And then I would have them in place. And that's why I want you to organize what you need to do for Dev 1 is you need to either, again, you got to figure out if you're going to take your concept from Dev 0 and come into it, or are you going to do something different? That's an important thing for you to figure out. Okay? All right, enough for this week. What's the question, right? What's the question for this week? Do you have, what's your plan for Dev 1? That's what I want to know, right? Right now is a perfect time, if you haven't already done it, to say, right? So in your reply, do you know what your create function, what your create is? What are you creating? Do you know what your reading is, right? You're reading back, because part of this is when you do create, you have all these form fields, right? This form that's got these fields in it. And then when you submit, you get the data, but you may not save all that data. You may only save the results of that data, right? So what is it you're going to create? What is it you're going to read? What is it you're going to update? And what is it you're going to delete? That's what I want to know. Even if you change your mind, I want you to at least think about it. All right. Have a great week. I look forward to seeing some of you in office hours, and peace out.